Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. I am incredibly humbled that you would choose to spend time with me today. My name's Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the lovely neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We have a wonderful, wonderful guest for you today. I say that for every show, and I really believe we have a wonderful guest for every show. That's why we want you to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcast. Our guest is the author of Why Evergreens Keep Their Leaves. Her name is AnneMarie Riley Guertin. Before we invite AnneMarie in, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by my all-new educational magic show, We Will Roar, Respect Others and Read. If you've been listening to the show, you know that I present educational magic shows. You know I've been doing it for over 30 years. I left social work over 30 years ago with this dream of being able to use magic and comedy to inspire kids to be respectful of one another. And I have had such a wonderful, wonderful life doing just that, traveling all over the eastern United States and Puerto Rico, spreading this message. And I would love to spread it to your community. I have a brand new show. Like I said, it's called We Will Roar, Respect Others and Read. One of the things I'm going to be doing in this show is to inspire students to choose to be respectful of themselves, their school, and every single person they meet. I'm also going to be inspiring kids to read aloud every day, hopefully to you, and also to visualize what it is that they are reading. Now, we know that choosing to be respectful and to treat others with the respect we want people to treat us with is a great first step towards building a safe and caring learning environment. But you may be asking, what does reading have to do with that? Well, if you've been listening to the show, you understand that reading helps improve kids' emotional intelligence and also helps increase their empathy. And we're really excited about that because I truly believe that this combination of making the choice to be respectful and reading and developing empathy for others is, again, the perfect way to build that safe and caring learning environment. I'm really, really touched by all the wonderful things that people have said about my performances over the years. Mary Maloney, she's the principal of St. Rose of Lima School in Newtown, Connecticut. She said in the past that Jedley's school assembly program supports our mission to provide a safe and caring learning environment for all of our students. And that makes me feel so wonderful. Please take a moment to visit my website, wewillroar.com. Now, I know that the chances are that you're not the person who brings the school assemblies into your school, but you know the people who do make those choices. The principal, the guidance counselor, maybe the librarian at your public library, or the youth minister at your church. If you visit wewillroar.com, find out a little bit about the show, and then share that information with those folks, they'd be really, really grateful because they're incredibly busy. And I'd be very grateful too. Again, the website is wewillroar.com. Joining us right now from Haverhill in Massachusetts, beautiful part of the world. She is coming to us again. She's here to talk about her brand new book, Why Evergreens Keep Their Leaves, from our friends at Familias. Please welcome back to the show, AnneMarie Riley Guertin. AnneMarie, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am wonderful. It's a little cloudy here in the Boston area, but nice and cool and comfortable.
Same here.
Yeah. Now, you're on, and your book is hopefully answering a question that lots and lots of kids, especially here in the Northeast, have. Why evergreens keep their leaves? Why aren't they like all the other trees that the leaves turn colors and fall to the ground every fall?
Well, part of my story will give you the reason or the myth behind why that happens, but it all has to do with an act of kindness towards a little cardinal who injured their wing in the fall before winter came.
Wow, very, very cool. So we're not talking a STEM book, we're talking a story book. And what was the inspiration for this book?
Well, my first book, How the Finch Got His Colors, did really well upon its release back in March of 2018. And about a month after its release, Familius reached out to me and asked if I would collaborate with them again on another folktale. So I did a little research to find just the right story. I like my stories to have messages of patience and kindness. And I came across a version of this story that was written in the 20s. And I floated the idea to them, and they loved it. And I was able to take that story and make it my own. And that's what you have right in front of you.
That's awesome. Now tell me, why is writing stories about patience and kindness so important to you?
Well, I'm an educator, and I deal in school systems with children, and I know how tough it is in the world that we live in outside of school, and I also know how tough it is on the inside with showing acts of kindness and being kind to one another. It's something that a lot of people struggle with, so it's an important message that I think children and adults alike need to hear a little bit more of. So in a non-preachy way, I thought I could get my message out through storybooks like this one.
Yeah, awesome. And it's true. There are schools. You know, I travel around performing in schools all across the United States and Puerto Rico, and there are some schools that I visit that are just absolutely amazing, and you can just feel the kindness. You can just feel the family spirit in those schools. And then there are other schools where you feel the opposite. And you can literally taste the tension when you walk into to a school. Has that also been your experience? Have you gone into different schools where, you know, at some places you just know that this is a loving, kind school family, and other places like, whoa, there needs to be a lot of work here?
I think for the most part I've been pretty lucky. A lot of us as educators have the same message of spreading kindness, so that's something we all really work towards. I've been in school situations where children come from less than great households and they have struggles of their own, and just showing them some love and compassion throughout the day, because sometimes that might be the only place in school where they find that. So luckily for me, I've been in supportive environments that is the message, kindness and patience and, you know, empathy for others. So I've been lucky in that respect, but I'm sure that there are places out there that have a little bit of work to do on that.
I think it's so very important for us to spread that message of being kind and being empathetic. And other than stories, what are the best ways do you think that we as parents can relate that message to our kids?
Oh, I think first and foremost it comes through modeling. So the way that you act in front of other people is what your children are going to emulate. So I know sometimes things can get tough and, you know, you can be aggravated or frustrated with something, but you need to remember you're modeling for kids how to act in the real world. So it's important for you to show them the way by doing it yourself. And I think it starts there.
You mean it's not cool, like when we're driving down, and you're a Massachusetts driver like me, it's not cool when someone cuts us off on 93 to start flipping the birds and screaming and hollering at them?
No, it wouldn't be appropriate. I mean, you could think it in your head, I guess, but yeah, you shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. I just like to think maybe they have some sort of emergency. I always try to come up with some sort of reason why people do what they do.
Well, and I think that's a really great lesson for our kids. And like you say, modeling is so important. And we've heard a lot of that on the podcast. So it's so important to model kindness as parents, for us to model kindness for our kids, for us to model mindfulness for our kids, for us to model reading for our kids. Well, LeVar Burton was on the show, and when I asked him for what inspired him to be so involved with literacy, with Reading Rainbow and the different projects that he works on, and it all came down to his mother, and remembering seeing his mother reading every single day, and if it wasn't her reading a book to them, she was reading a novel by her, for herself, or she was reading a newspaper or a magazine. So, yeah, modeling is so very, very important for our kids.
You're right. And you know what? You are your child's greatest teacher.
Yes, you are. I say that often, and sometimes people, I don't know if you've ever been corrected. I've had people come up to me and after I've said, you are your kid's most important teacher, and people have come up and said, no, because, there might be parents out there who are terrible teachers and they're teaching the kids all the wrong message. And I just say to those folks, I agree, but they're still teaching the kids, and that's a really bad message to get across to kids. So it's really important for those parents to understand how important their role is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Is that something, as an educator, you're able to share with the parents of the students that you're dealing with?
In my role now, I'm a literacy coach, so I spread the importance of modeling for your children through reading and through working with them. And I also talk a lot about how your influence on them is what drives them when they get older. So the more that you work with them, the more that you sit down, and the more that you model for them, the better off they're going to be. So in my role, I have a lot of contact with parents because I'm doing a lot of professional development around reading and literacy and just being a good human. So,
what kind of literacy programs that you've encountered that you're really excited about and really want to implement with your students, or hope to implement at some point in the future?
So I've been an educator for 19 years, and I've seen the impact of balanced literacy. So as a teacher, you're pulling smaller groups of children and you're working at their level. So if they're advanced, you're pushing them. If they're struggling, you're supporting them. If they're, on the trajectory to be where they're supposed to be, you're help guiding and scaffolding them in that. And I think that work is important. And I think it came a long way from the round robin reading that I did back in the 70s and 80s, where your teacher gave you all the same book and you sink or you swim. So I think that's, we've come a long way in education. Certainly we have a long ways to go. There's a lot of different needs now, I think, and a lot more trauma in the world than there was when I was growing up. So there's a lot of factors that come into play when you're working in a classroom or working with small children that you need to keep in the back of your head.
Wow, what an amazing concept. Let's see where the kid's at and try to meet that specific need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like one of those, duh, of course.
We've come a long way. We have.
Yeah, it is. I think school systems, it's an incredibly challenging time right now because there is so much pressure on schools. And one of the things that's so frustrating is that schools seem to get politicized in so many ways. And so instead of meeting the needs of the individual students, a lot of times I think on the district level, there's so much pressure for them to, kind of satisfy the politicians or wherever the funding sources, are pushing them.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. It's a lot of data-driven, curriculum, I think.
Now, as a literacy teacher, I'm imagining that you are exposed to loads and loads of books. Are there any, other than, of course, Why Evergreens Keep Their Leaves, are there any that you are finding that are especially popular with kids at your school?
Oh, well, I work in a multitude of grades, so I'm a district literacy coach for K-8, so I see a lot of different genres and a lot of different books, but my heart is still in picture books. That's where I tend to live and what I know. And I think that a big book this year has been A Creepy Pair of Underpants.
A Creepy Pair of Underpants.
Yeah, that's a big hit.
Not surprising. Underwear seems to be there's a magic trick that I do where we show an empty box and then we pull out, there's a silk in there. And another and another and another and another, and the last thing that comes out is a pair of underwear. And It always gets a huge reaction from the kids. Not the same reaction from the teachers, unfortunately. But so who is the author of this book?
That one I have to look up. I don't have it in front of me.
Well, we'll look it up and we'll.
Yeah. Another one is B.J. Novak's The Book with No Pictures. That's another great one the kids love.
Great.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit. We've talked some with authors of graphic novels and comics about the fact that reading comics and graphic novels is reading, and so if that's what's turning our kids on to reading, we should encourage that. Is that something that you agree with as a literacy coach?
I do, to a certain extent. I mean, we all, as adults, read for enjoyment, do we not?
Mm-hmm.
So,
absolutely.
I don't think it should always be academic. It takes the fun out of reading. It takes the motivation out of reading. So I don't get upset when kids are reading graphic novels. They are reading.
What do you think it is? Why do you think there are certain kids that are drawn to comics and graphic novels?
I think, I'm going to be honest with you, I think a lot of it has to do with the images and the graphics that are in them and it breaking up the text a little bit. When they're text heavy, you can see the eye rolls and the huffing. So it just gives a little visual break, I think.
Well, that makes a lot of sense because, when I'm creating advertisements to either promote the podcast or build the website or promote my educational magic shows, anytime the experts look at it, they say, there's not enough white on this page.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There's
White
too
space.
Too many words here. Break it down. And that's so much. If I look back at some of the advertisements from like the 40s and the 50s, and they were like little novels in of themselves, selling a tube of toothpaste. And we seem to be on the other side of the spectrum right now.
Yeah, I can't remember where I heard it, but since the 70s, the texts have gotten shorter, so picture books are fewer than 500 words. Mm-hmm. And back in the 70s when I was a kid, they'd be up to 1,500. The attention span is a lot less, I think, with technology and the advances we've made that, too many words on a page is not stimulating enough for kids. As sad as that is.
I was just going to say that is really sad. The less information there is, the more stimulating it is. That doesn't seem to make sense to me, but it certainly experiences bearing that to be true. What about technology? Do you think it's helping or hurting kids in terms of literacy?
I think there are different ways to look at it. Certainly you need to monitor what they're doing. I think in certain aspects, when you're doing research in a classroom now, if you're doing a research project, like the information is at your fingertips, but you need to know how to decipher whether it's real or not factual. So it can be helpful in certain aspects and it can hinder in certain aspects.
Do you think all the time kids are spent looking at screens do you find that this is taking away from the time that they're reading or developing a love of reading?
I think maybe at home. I'm not sure. It really depends on how the parents view, reading with their kids. Some parents work a lot and it's just easier to put their kid on a Kindle and have them read that way. There's different reasons why parents do what they do. For me, my kids read tangible books. My husband and I are both educators, so we believe in that. Mm-hmm. And we still read with them. My daughter's in 8th grade and she's 13 and my son is 10 and he's going into 5th and we still read with them at nighttime. They might not read out loud. Sometimes they come and sit down and read with us when we're reading, but my son still likes to be read to. So that's something my husband and I still do.
And that's something that we encourage here on the podcast. And we've talked a lot about the different benefits. What, from your point of view, either as a parent or actually both, as a parent and as a literacy coach, what do you think are the major benefits of reading, either co-reading, reading aloud with your children at these different ages, as a teenager and a preteen?
Well, I think for one, you're modeling how to read, vocabulary, how to break down words. There's the whole prosody, which is the way that you enunciate words and the intonation that goes into how you're expressing when you're reading, punctuation and that kind of thing. So those are the types of things that they pick up from you when you're modeling that for them.
Cool. That is one of those benefits that I don't think we've covered on the show, and I think it's real important.
Mm-hmm. Sure is.
Now,
you're talking to a literacy coach. This is my everyday, so this is my spiel.
Well, and we're here. I'm just a podcast host, so, some people might think when I'm talking about literacy, I'm talking out of a part of my body I shouldn't be talking out of.
Oh, stop.
So it's good to have an expert on. And you are the expert on why evergreens keep their leaves. Tell us, one of the things that really struck me about your first book was the illustrations were absolutely gorgeous. What about in this new book that from Familius? Is that we're going to find the same kind of brilliant colors and illustrations?
Oh, absolutely. So I was thrilled when they reached out and asked if I would collaborate with them again, and I was told that Elena would be doing the illustration. So I knew instantaneously it was going to sparkle, and I had an inkling as to what it would look like because there are cardinals in my first book, so I had kind of a little view of what it might look like. But I was literally blown away. So I just got my author copies yesterday and in hand, and I got to see them. Of course, I got to see the PDF beforehand, but it's nothing like touching the actual pages and turning them and seeing it. It's amazing.
And as an author, what is it like to be, because I know when we write a book, a picture book, there's images that we might have in our mind. What's it like when you finally get that book and you're seeing it and you're reading? Is it like you're reading the story for the very first time when it's combined with the pictures?
Oh, absolutely. I think for me, that was the hardest part about being an author, because when you're writing, you tend to visualize things. So, of course, I pictured my books in my head, and I was a little nervous to give up the creative control, because when you're traditionally published, they don't necessarily tell you who your illustrator is right away, and I'm not sure if that's to not have you influence the way they interpret your words or not. But I'm a control freak too, so I had a little bit of an unsettling feeling not knowing who the illustrator was or what the illustrations would look like, but she did a fantastic job. She researched where the story came from, what the folk art of that time might look like, and that's the inspiration she drew for Finch. And then the same is true for Evergreens. Well, that's what I call it, Evergreens. But it's amazing. I mean, she did better than what I pictured in my head, so it's a good thing that she's the illustrator and not me.
And remind us of your illustrator's name.
Elena Perez Garcia.
Excellent. Well, I love it. The cardinals are such beautiful birds. We are fortunate here in Reedville to live next to a wildlife sanctuary. And we're actually on, we have cardinals here and all sorts of birds, and we're actually on we seem to be on a migration highway. There are different times of the year when our backyards are filled with birds and the sound of birds, and it's just amazing.
It is. And, my son and I are, well, we're not birders, but we sit out on my back deck every morning, and we have a whole bunch of cardinals in the backyard. And yesterday, it was sort of a weird kind of day. I knew my books were coming, and I opened the front door, and there were 4 of them that flew into a pine tree right in my yard. And it's just kind of ironic because that's where this cardinal lives, is in a pine tree in my book.
I
that was wild.
I think they got the message from our friends at Familius.
I think they knew.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I know folks are going to want to know where they can connect with you online and find out more about your books and more about AnneMarie Riley Guertin. So where can folks connect with you?
So I'm on Twitter. My handle is @ARileyGuertin, and they can also find me on the web. My website is www.AnneMarie, ANNEMARIE, Riley, RILEY, Guertin, GUERTIN.com. And I have some exciting news to share with my readers coming up.
Can you give us a hint?
I can give you a hint. So my agent, Rebecca, was just sent an email on Monday that I was offered 2 different contracts on 2 different original books. So I have 2 more that are coming out in 2021.
Well, congratulations, and consider yourself invited back to talk about those books when they are ready.
Thank you.
We've been talking to the author of Why Evergreens Keep Their Leaves, a brand new book from our friends at Familius Publishing, AnneMarie Riley Guertin. AnneMarie, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Jennifer Vitanzo. She is the author of Santiago, True Tales of a Little Bug in a Big World. It's a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Please don't miss it. Hey, if you're in the Rochester, New York area this coming weekend, the weekend of September 14th, please be sure to check me at the Rochester Fringe Festival. My performance is absolutely free, and we would love to see you there. It's this weekend, Saturday, September 14th, at the Rochester Fringe Festival. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so very, very wonderful. Of course, we want to start by saying thank you to Kate Farrow and all of our friends over at Familius Publishing for introducing us to our guest, AnneMarie Riley Guertin. Of course, we want to thank AnneMarie. I want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima Khan, for all she does for the show. Check out her blog at readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. And most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.